Welcome to this presentation in which I'm going to discuss my late work policy. Now, this isn't a very fun topic to have a discussion about, but it's information that you need to have from day one so that you can plan accordingly. In my experience at Collin, when I first started, I accepted late work all the time, and I thought all of the other instructors were super mean when they didn't allow students to submit late work. But now that I've been here for almost a decade, I've come to see the wisdom of that. And so that is my policy. I don't accept any late work for assignments and quizzes. I don't care if there's a zombie apocalypse. I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't mean it in a hard or cruel way. I'm humanly very sympathetic to your situation, but it's not going to cause me to give you an extension. Please don't ask because you already know the answer. It's an awkward conversation. You're embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. There's really no need for it. I'm really and truly not going to make an exception for you. Part of the reason I'm not going to make an exception is that most people who find themselves in a difficult position don't ask. And so for me to cut you a break because you asked would be being profoundly unfair to the folks who sucked it up and said, you know what, I missed the deadline, I need to move on. So it's just not going to happen. Please don't ask. But if you do ask, I'll be polite, but there is zero chance of you being able to submit any late work. Now I'm going to explain to you why I have the policy. You probably don't care. You probably think I'm very mean right now, and I don't blame you. Probably if I were in your shoes, I'd feel that way. But I'm going to explain the policy just in the chance that perhaps I can redeem myself a little bit in your eyes. The reality is, in the real world, there is no late work. If you miss the deadline, you're out of luck, or there's very, very significant consequences. I work in the legal field, and I can tell you story after story about people who were even 5 or 10 minutes late, and the court was completely disinterested in why they were late or what happened. There's actually a story in the state of Texas where some volunteer lawyers, in other words, lawyers who were not receiving any money for compensation to represent a death row inmate. They were 15 minutes late filing an appeal. The court didn't consider the appeal, and the man was executed that night. Now, I'm not saying that life or death is typically involved. Those are really extreme facts. But what I'm trying to do is make the point that this is a cold, hard, cruel world. And for me to say late work's okay is actually not good. It's not fair to you because that's a truth you need to learn today. And it's a pretty easy place in school to learn. Nobody's going to get fired if, you're not going to get fired if you don't turn something in. You're not going to go to jail if you miss a deadline here. This is a place of relatively small consequences for mistakes. And by having the experiences, by missing a deadline, you can learn how that feels and know, wait a second, once I'm in the real world, I don't want this to happen again. Most legal professionals who've been out for very long have missed a deadline. And most of us who've missed a deadline, and I include myself in that category, had sleepless nights for months after having missed that deadline. I can still have cringe flashbacks to the deadline that I missed, and it was over almost 30 years ago when I missed that deadline. I didn't sleep, I couldn't eat, my whole life was wrecked for weeks. I don't want you to go through that. I can't inoculate you completely from that, but if I can help you avoid that consequence, or just a portion of y'all to avoid that consequence, there's probably almost nothing more valuable that I could do for you. So that's just the policy. Another reason that I don't accept late work is because people, I don't want to slam on other instructors, but instructors who accept late work usually are not being fair to students. There's a category of students, I would say it's probably about 70% of students, who always turn in their work on time. Or if they don't turn in their work, they know they're not going to turn it in, and they're okay with that. Okay. They plan accordingly. They don't go to the party. They don't take that extra shift at work. They take the steps that are necessary to get their work in on time. Somebody else who doesn't make those choices, who then is permitted to submit the late work, is being treated in a way that's more advantageous than the students who do meet the deadline. That's unfair to the people who turn in their work on time. So even if the policy is fairly applied, late policy, it is inherently an unfair one to the students who submitted on time. Another problem is that it's so difficult to apply. Every situation is different, and it's just impossible to be consistent. Somebody's Aunt Mabel dies. Well, is this Aunt Mabel who raised them from infancy, or is this Aunt Mabel that they haven't seen in 20 years? Those are different situations. For me to fine-tune whether that merits an ability to have more time or not becomes really tricky, especially since I don't have really any source of information except the student who wants the extension. So of course, Aunt Mabel becomes their favorite aunt of all time, whether or not she really is. It's essentially impossible for me to find out what the true story is, and it involves a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on both the part of the student and me to consolidate that information. It also creates an intrusion into students' personal lives. Sometimes I've had students who shared with me back when I accepted late work, they felt that they needed to share very personal circumstances. I've had students share about domestic violence, about alcohol abuse situations, all kinds of situations that are probably things that they did not really want to share with me, and that probably weren't the most appropriate for me to be aware of. And that can interfere with the student-teacher relationship. And so that's another reason why I don't really want to get into the circumstances, because I respect the fact that you're adults and that you have things happening in your life that I don't need to know about and that you don't want to share with me. It's about boundaries, really, from that perspective. Another issue can be consistency. And I guess this also relates to fairness. I've had students in the past who would turn in doctor's notes. These students perhaps had access to health care insurance. We all know that a doctor is going to give you a note excusing you from school if you actually go to see him or her. That's an automatic situation. In my doctor's office, I can get a note. I can tell the clerk in the front about what I want the note to say, and the doctor doesn't even know what what the note is going to say, because I dictate the note to the clerk in front of the desk. And so basically it's a free get out of a late assignment situation if I have the money to pay for the doctor's visit and if I have the insurance. Another student may not have a circumstance that would be applicable to getting a note from a doctor, or they don't have access to health insurance, or they can't afford their copay. As a result, even though they may have been genuinely sick, they're not able to get that note, and therefore they can't do the makeup work. Listen, I get it. There are legitimate reasons why you're going to miss work assignments in class. It's a perfectly reasonable thing if you're very sick or your Aunt Mabel dies that you don't turn in that homework. When I give a 0, I'm not saying you're a bad person or a bad student or irresponsible. I'm saying this is the consequence of you not turning in the work. If I were in your shoes, I might have done exactly what you did. So please don't interpret that 0 to mean that I'm thinking bad thoughts about you. Honestly, I don't think about it one way or the other. There's no grade there. The deadline is passed. I put a 0 in. And many times I think to myself, I bet there was a good reason for this. But still, the 0 is the grade that's going to apply. Still, some students say, yes, but my reason is really awesome. Well, my question is going to be, okay, you had a really good reason for not being able to work on this on Sunday. But what about the Saturday before, or the Friday before, or the Thursday before, or the Wednesday before? Depending upon the week that we're in the semester, you've had all semester to work on this. Unless you can give me a reason why you couldn't have done it any of the other days, we have the same problem. Now, I will say that if a student comes to me before the deadline and communicates with me, there is a small chance that given very compelling circumstances, I might be able to give an extension. But don't even think about it on the date the assignment is due, and obviously not after the due date. It's rare that I give an extension even under those circumstances, but there have been some very, very compelling situations where I have given maybe an extra day extension. But after the fact or on the day of, it's just not going to happen. It's okay to get a 0 on an assignment. The reality is that we're talking about assignments and quizzes. We're not talking about, you know, a single grade that's worth 20% of your overall grade. And a 0 on one of these activities is not going to significantly affect your grade. Maybe a letter grade, probably not even that. So keeping a sense of perspective is also part of that journey of entering the real world, whether it's the professional world or the legal world. Calibrating your response to a particular disappointment is a good skill to have. Oh, I got a 0 on that. Well, what kind of effect is that going to have on my grade? Well, let me check. Oh, a second. Quizzes are worth 20% of my grade, and we're having 20 quizzes. So getting that 0 on that's worth 1% of my grade. Not thrilled about it, but probably not even going to drop me a letter grade. May make me want to focus a little bit more on other things so I can maybe make up that 1 point. But life is life, and I'm going to move on. Not a big deal. Having that reaction can be very, very helpful because you're going to have ups and downs. Okay, so here are some suggestions that I have. Again, life involves trade-offs. I had a situation with my son the other day. My son's in middle school. And he had been delaying about working on some things, as he is wont to do. Anyway, it came down to he had 2 things due the next day. One was a daily grade. The other was a major grade. We really only had enough time to really do one of those well. And so I said, let's just focus on the major grade. We finished the major grade, and I think did a pretty good job on it. But we didn't do the daily grade. That's okay. Sometimes you're going to get a 0 on something, and it's a perfectly reasonable decision under the circumstances. I get that. But you don't want the 0. So what do you do to avoid the 0? Well, one thing is, and you may want to stop me right now and do this, is calendar all the due dates. Typically in an online course, I have all the due dates on the first day. If I don't, I'll have it within a couple of days, at least for the first several weeks. And so go ahead and calendar those dates, but actually put down 2 sets of calendarings. One is the actual official due date, the real due date, and then you may want to give yourself a fake due date. When I was in college, I had a roommate. Her name is Dawn, and we had 2 alarm clocks in our room, and one we called Cindy Standard Time and one we called Dawn Standard Time, because Dawn was late for everything. She's a wonderful woman, but late for everything. And so if the clock was 7 a.m., on Dawn's clock it said 7:30. And the idea was if she saw 7:30, she'd freak out and realize she has to rush to get to class. And so she actually set the time later, so in the hopes that that would urge her on. It wasn't always the most effective, but anyway, it was a good idea. So having an earlier due date can be the impetus that you need. Let's say this assignment is due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Well, go ahead and act as if it's due at 11:59 on Saturday night. Treat that as your real deadline. That way, if some problem comes up, if it takes you longer and you don't get done until 1 a.m. Sunday morning, you're okay, because the due date that you were working under wasn't the real due date. If you use a fake due date that's 24 hours in advance, you can give yourself an automatic extension if you need it. And so that's a good strategy. If you treat the real deadline as if it's the only deadline you need to worry about, you're going to miss it sometimes. That's just reality. Some folks may need to have a deadline that's more than 24 hours earlier. Again, that's a decision for you to make. The third type of thing you want to calendar is actual time to work on the assignment. And there's different levels of work. if it's an assignment that is unique, that isn't like the ones we've done in the past, you will want to look at it several days in advance just to make sure you understand it. And so in that way, if you look at it and you go, I don't even know what to do with this, I don't even know how to approach it, then you can reach out to me, the instructor. Hey, Professor Groover, I don't know what to do here. Can I come by your office hours and we can talk about it? Awesome, wonderful. Would be delighted to talk about it with you. But guess what? On the day that the assignment is due, that's probably not going to happen. And so have one deadline that is look it over to make sure there's no surprises. And then have another deadline where you're actually setting aside time to work on it. You're budgeting that into your work calendar. And my suggestion is to refer to this calendaring tool, whether it's on your phone or it's a paper one or whatever, every day to see, okay, what project am I supposed to be working on in Class A? What project should I be working on in Class B? What project should I be working on in Class C? Then you need to have a technology backup plan. Technology fails us all the time. It certainly has failed me many times. One good backup plan are the computer labs at Collin. As a student, you're entitled to use those, and those are very reliable computers that are updated and ready to go. All you need is your student ID. They're not open 24/7, but they are open lots and lots of hours. So if your computer isn't working well or your Wi-Fi is spotty, this is an awesome backup plan. But again, if it's 11:30 p.m. on Sunday night, no, this doesn't become a realistic option. So again, if you've set that deadline 24 hours in advance, then a technology backup plan such as Collin's Computer Labs can make sense. You may also have a friend's computer or some other approach that's going to work. And then finally, budget your time so you can get assistance from me. Sometimes you just get stuck on something. And I can't tell you how many times where I've had a student who's told me, wow, I spent 8 hours on this. And once I come in and talk to you for 5 minutes, I understand it. I get it. If only I'd come to see you 7 hours ago. So please feel free to come and see me. You're going to have to check office hours, and that's going to involve you planning well in advance. But isn't it better to do the assignment, say, on Tuesday, maybe for an hour, meet with me on Wednesday, maybe for 30 minutes and have the assignment done in an hour and a half, versus destroying your whole Sunday working 12 hours and maybe not even ending up with a good grade because you're not sure what you're doing. Procrastination can actually cost you a lot more time and maybe even not result in as great a grade. So plan, especially if it's an assignment you haven't done before or it's especially tricky material for you, plan time in it so that you can come to my office hours, know when they are, know where I am, and get the support that you need. So again, I hope that this lecture has been helpful for you. Please remember this policy so you don't get burned. I hate to have to apply it. I don't want you to miss out on any credit. I really, really don't. But I am going to be applying this policy consistently in the class. Thank you as always for your attention and have a wonderful day.